Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy NextGenNero back with another review, man. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're new to the channel. We just gonna hop right into it. We gotta talk about Lost Soul Aside and why I think, it really don't deserve some of the hate that it's getting, but I also just understand some of the hate that it's getting. And before we even start, I want to say I did enjoy the game, but I definitely think this should have been a $40 to $50 game, because asking for a full price for this game, I feel like it's kind of a disservice when you have the Claire Expeditions of the world and the Wu-Chang Fallen Feathers. We have a lot of good $50 and under games this year. So, when you come out and you ask for $60, the full price of a game, in modern times, you open yourself up for a lot of criticism. So with that being said, let's get into the review about what I liked, what I didn't like, and what I think of the game overall. So the first thing I want to talk about is the graphics, gameplay, and art design. So the graphics in this game isn't anything special. It's actually very serviceable, and it's, it can be beautiful at times. While it's not the visual spectacle I've come to expect from Sony games or Sony funded games, this isn't like their first party game. They just funded this guy, and over time he grew a little team of 40. I think it is important to remember the history of this game, and it was in development for 10 years. It was affected by COVID. Like I said, it was a small team that got a little bit of funding from Sony backed up, but you can definitely tell it didn't have a big budget to work with throughout the game. And that's why I said this game should have been $50 to $40, to respect the audience that you're trying to sell to. But, it can be rough around the edges, but on the PS5 Pro, man, it was beautiful. It ran very solid, locked 60 FPS. It did have this weird autosave stutter, which I do not like. It's kind of like, it feel like an Unreal Engine thing. I think this is Unreal Engine 4, so I'm become accustomed to it in UE5, so seeing it in the later engine of 4 is kind of annoying, but hopefully they iron that out. But besides that, performance was absolutely perfect where it mattered, which is combat and your fights. Like I said, the combat was visually stunning, especially when you get in the flow of the game and everything comes together. You get to switching your weapons, and some of these boss fights, man, are extremely beautiful and just epic all around from beginning to end, and I really appreciate that. The character models can be decent. It's nothing to write home about for me. It wasn't a big deal because that really wasn't the focus of the game for me, and it wasn't my focus either. I will say the cutscenes are very well done. The story beats and the introduction to boss fights is very well done as well. The game also has some really dope environments, and while you can't interact with everything that's being shown, it's nice to have some eye candy while you chug along this linear story. So like I said, man, the graphics is really solid. Nothing too crazy, nothing to write home about, but it does its job, and it's just a very simple but pretty game. So go in there with the expectations of just being stunned and jaw dropped by the combat and all the particles of effect. But as far as just the moment-to-moment gameplay, it's nothing too crazy graphically wise. But something that I did really enjoy and stand out to me is the overall music and sound design. Now guys, I have to be honest, this game has some of the worst English voice acting, and I can't state that. Let me run it back, guys. This game has some of the worst English voice acting I've ever experienced in a video game in a very long time. So with that being said, I highly recommend switching to Chinese or Japanese language, and you'll immediately have a better experience. And it kind of made me care a little bit more about the story and the characters when I had to read, and I just thought the native languages sounded better. But the music in this game is very good, especially during fights and battles. It can be intense. It all blends together very well with the gameplay at hand. Sound design as a whole is pretty good with the weapons and the hits sounding really good as they connect, which I always appreciate in video games, and it definitely stands out in the hack and slash genre, which I would put this under. So the visuals decent, the music I think is really good, the voice acting is horrible, guys. Now the story and attention to detail, man, the next thing I want to talk about is story. You guys know I don't spoil it, so quite frankly, there's nothing to spoil, man. The story is pretty forgettable, if I'm being honest. It's a simple story about saving your sister and saving the world. We've all been here. We've all heard this before. I don't think it was executed as well as it could have been. I just couldn't find myself caring too much about the characters or the world as much as I wanted. But as I mentioned earlier, its world is beautiful, and it's kind of worth hearing about. But the game just doesn't make you care enough to, hear about it. So the gameplay was by far my favorite aspect of the game. So let's get into it and talk about the gameplay and combat, man. Yo, this game has some of my favorite combat and gameplay in a video game this year, and maybe this generation. That's not including the FromSoft games and stuff like that. But if we're just talking about straight up hack and slash, it seems like we don't really get that too much nowadays. You know, and this game reminded me of a PS3, 360 era hack and slash, PS2 era game in all the right ways, man. And I can't say enough about how much I enjoyed this combat. And after taking about 20 hours to finish the game on the first playthrough, I feel like I barely scraped the surface with how deep the combat is. I can definitely see a community being built around this game and just learning and showing off the different type of combos being linked. You have 4 different main weapons: a quick sword, a heavy great sword, a pole blade, and a scythe. And they all are dope and unique and have dope skill trees that you can customize and unlock abilities with, and extend your combos. You also have slots where you can put trinkets, and it kind of give you like a customization option. And it can kind of be sore to the eyes because it's not very deep, but it is a nice addition to make each weapon feel different as you improve them. I ended up settling on maining the great sword for most of my playthrough. As I mentioned earlier, everything has its weaknesses and strength, but it's definitely worth playing and investing in them all. And some bosses, you're going to have no choice but to switch up weapons and use them to the max ability. The skill tree is just pretty much you unlocking and upgrading skills and perks for each weapon, which is cool with me. And it also gives you some passive buffs for your main character Kaiser as well. But I was left kind of wanting more as far as being able to upgrade and tweak certain things, especially as far as the RPG aspect of the game. And you're probably thinking, well, if the graphics is nothing crazy and the story is pretty lackluster, what will I find in this game that I enjoy? Well, let me tell you, by far, it's just the overall combat, man. These boss fights are spectacular. I've seen some people complaining about it's too many boss fights, which is understandable if you come into this game expecting a Final Fantasy style story. But honestly, I think more games like this is needed. Very amazing combat with linear and not an overly bloated game with just open world nonsense and whatnot. And while it might not be for everybody, it's definitely for me. And I think it'll be for a handful of people out there as they get this game into their hand, maybe down the road or years later. And it'll definitely be one of those games that people come back to and be like, man, why was we so hard on this game? Kind of like I said about Starfield, man. But, it was refreshing to have a nice, short, and sweet experience that had a great and challenging combat, man. But, no stupid fetch quests as far as the gameplay and combat. They get an A+ for me. It was really the highlight of this game. And honestly, it's worth picking up, and definitely worth picking up on sale just for the combat alone, in my humble opinion. But as I mentioned before, I definitely think this game should have been $40 or $50. I think it would have been received a lot better and picked up by a lot more people. But I think it's important to remember, man, this game was started by one guy, one man. He later got funded by Sony, ended up with a team around 40 people. And it was still a small team on a small budget, man. And the last thing I want to talk about, guys, is replayability. And it definitely has a really good amount of replayability, right? So, like I said, it's not a very short game. It takes about 20 hours. You unlock new difficulties after you beat it. You get a new game plus, so you get to keep all your skills and stuff like that. So that was really cool. You get to keep all your money. You just get to keep everything. It's just a new game plus if you're familiar with that. And definitely if you want to do the platinum, you're going to have to do multiple playthroughs. It has some challenging trophies as well. Beating certain bosses on the hardest difficulty without using items. So it's really dope, man. You can have different builds. You can have builds and playthroughs dedicated to mastering one weapon or just 2 weapons, man. So it's a lot of freedom. And you also get boss rush, man. You get to run through the boss rush tab where you re-challenge all the bosses you've encountered during your adventure. So that's pretty cool too, man, especially with the bosses being a highlight of this game. I thought it was dope that we don't have to go back and replay the game to replay some of my favorite bosses. It's a boss in this game that's really centered around water, and that even damn near brought my PS5 Pro to its knees, because, man, it was so much water everywhere, so many particles. I felt the frames dropping. That was one of the only occasions, but that just goes to show how epic and big this boss fight was. It's your guy, NextGenNero. Please hit that like button. Please comment, share, subscribe with a friend, and I'll catch you guys with the next one.